For Sarah, Leo, and Maya, their new life began when one person refused to let them fade into the background. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest miracles don't come from a grand gesture, but from the simple, profound act of paying attention. From the quiet decision to be the one who doesn't look away. They had walked until the concrete turned to dirt. For days, they had been invisible. To a city of millions, just another shadow in a world that refused to see. But what they found at the edge of nowhere would change everything. What happens when the world looks away but one person doesn't? Just days before, their world was a maze of steel and glass. Sarah and her two children, Leo and Maya, were like ghosts, haunting the arteries of a city that never slept, yet never saw them. Every passing face was a fresh reminder of their invisibility. 1,000 people, 2,000, a river of humanity just flowing around them as if they were stones in a stream. So often, a homeless family in the U.S. looks just like this, a single mother with young children, a statistic Sarah now felt in every aching bone. She'd once had a job, an apartment, a life that felt like hers. But one lost job, one illness, and a broken-down car later, the floor had simply vanished from under their feet. It can happen that fast. A lack of affordable housing is a huge factor, but so are low wages, family crises, and health issues. Even with a job, many parents just can't make ends meet. Sarah had tried. She stood in lines filled out forms, her voice growing hoarse, explaining their situation to faces behind plexiglass. But the shelters were full. The waiting lists were years long. Service providers had been sounding the alarm for years, reporting a heartbreaking rise in family homelessness, a wave that had crashed right over Sarah and her children, leaving them stranded. She remembers Leo's small hand in hers, his face pressed against a bakery window, the warm light a universe away from their cold reality. He didn't ask for anything. He'd learned not to. He just watched. His 8-year-old eyes understanding a hardship they never should have known. Maya, only 5, had retreated into a world of silence, her thumb permanently in her mouth, her gaze fixed on her mother's worn-out shoes. The true weight of homelessness isn't just the hunger or the cold. It's the crushing weight of being ignored. It's the shame that curdles in your stomach when someone deliberately looks away. For Sarah, the most terrifying part was the fear that her children would start to believe it, too, that they were worthless because the world treated them that way. One night, huddled in a bus station, trying to shield them from a biting wind, Sarah made a decision. The city had nothing left for them but heartache. It was a concrete tomb. They had to leave. They would walk until they couldn't walk anymore, hoping that somewhere, anywhere, the horizon held something other than more pavement. Their exodus began at dawn, a silent departure from a city that wouldn't notice they were gone. Sarah had a half-eaten bag of crackers, a single bottle of water, and a fierce, desperate hope that felt more like a prayer. The first few miles were a blur of urban sprawl, the skyscrapers shrinking behind them like monuments to a life that had rejected them. Leo, trying to be brave for his mom, counted red cars. Maya just held onto the hem of Sarah's coat, her small legs struggling to keep up. The journey was a silent testament to a mother's will. Sarah told them stories of a magical place where flowers grew wild and you could see the stars. A place with no sirens, no locked doors, no cold shoulders. She didn't know if this place really existed, but she spoke it into being, her words a fragile shield against their reality. They were now what researchers call the hidden homeless, a term often used to describe those in rural areas who aren't on street corners but are in cars, in the woods, or, like Sarah's family, walking between worlds. Here, there are fewer services, no public transport, and an emptiness that can feel just as scary as a crowded city. After the first day, the kids' energy was gone. Leo stopped counting cars. Maya's silence grew heavier. Sarah carried her, on her back, her own body screaming in protest with every step. Her resolve started to fray. Had she made a terrible mistake? Was she leading her children from a slow death in the city to a faster one out here?
The sun beat down.
The water ran out.
The
hope that had fueled her first steps dwindled to a tiny, flickering ember.
They
Walked past farmhouses with lights on in the windows, families inside, living lives. So different they might as well have been on another planet. She didn't dare knock. The rejections in the city had stolen that courage. So they just kept walking, propelled by the faintest whisper of a promise she had made to her children. A promise of safety. A promise of home. It was dusk on the second day when Sarah's body finally gave out. Her legs buckled, and she crumpled to the ground at the edge of a long, dusty driveway. A simple wooden sign read Hopewell Farm. Leo and Maya collapsed beside her, too tired to even cry. This was it. The end of the road. She had failed them. She closed her eyes, the world spinning. When she opened them again, a pair of worn leather boots stood in front of her. Her eyes traveled up to see a man, his face lined by the sun, his expression not of pity or annoyance, but of quiet concern. This was Arthur. He didn't say, "What are you doing here?" He didn't say, "You're on private property." He just knelt, his movements slow, and offered a metal canteen. "You look like you could use some water," he said, his voice calm and steady. Sarah flinched. Kindness felt so
foreign it was startling.
Leo, trying to protect his mom, put a small arm in front of her. Arthur just smiled, a gentle, unassuming expression. He didn't
push.
He just waited. Slowly, cautiously, Sarah took the canteen. The water was cool, and it was the most profound relief she had ever known. "There's a warm kitchen and a hot meal just up the path," Arthur said, gesturing with his head toward the farmhouse in the distance. "No questions. Just food and rest. The children look like they need it." He wasn't offering a handout. He was offering a lifeline. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone wasn't looking through them, but directly at them. With every ounce of strength she had left, Sarah helped her children to their feet and followed the kind stranger toward the house, into a mystery she was too tired to solve. The farmhouse kitchen was warm and smelled of chicken soup and baking bread, a sensory shock after the cold indifference of the streets. Arthur settled them at a large wooden table, placing bowls of steaming soup in front of them without a word. Leo and Maya ate with a quiet desperation that broke Sarah's heart. But then, something incredible happened. Maya, who had been so silent, looked up from her bowl and gave Arthur a small, shy smile. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. Leo, watching his sister, felt a wave of relief so powerful it brought tears to his eyes, which he quickly wiped away. After the kids had eaten, Arthur's wife, a woman with equally kind eyes named Eleanor, led them to a simple room with 2 beds. The sheets were clean and smelled of lavender. As soon as their heads hit the pillows, the children were fast asleep. Sarah, though, stayed awake.
She
sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. This kindness felt dangerous. It was too much, too unconditional. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop, the bill, the catch, the moment they'd be asked to leave. In her world, nothing was ever free. For so many women in her position, that caution is born from brutal experience. Studies of homeless mothers in shelters have found that a tragic majority, sometimes over 90%, have a history of abuse, teaching them to distrust everyone. This safety felt like a trap. But as the hours passed, and the only sounds were the ticking of a clock and the chirping of crickets outside, a tiny, fragile seed of trust began to take root in her heart. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of laughter. Peeking out the window, she saw a sight that made her gasp.
In a
large, fenced-in yard, Maya was chasing butterflies with 2 other little
girls.
Leo was watching a teenage boy feed chickens, a look of utter fascination on his face. She walked out into the sunshine, hesitant. Another woman, seeing her confusion, came over with a warm smile. "It's a bit of a shock at first, isn't it?" she said. "My name is Maria. We got here 6 months ago." And then, the mystery unraveled.
As
Arthur and Eleanor gave her a quiet tour. Sarah saw that Hopewell Farm wasn't just a farm.
it was a sanctuary.
There were other women, other children, each with a story that echoed her own, women who had escaped violence, or who, like her, had simply been swallowed by poverty. This place was inspired by real-world initiatives like those in the Catholic worker movement or programs like the Homeless Garden Project, which aimed to provide not just shelter but meaningful work and community. Arthur explained that he'd inherited the farm years ago, after seeing the growing crisis of family homelessness and the lack of resources, especially in rural areas. He and Eleanor had decided to turn their land into a refuge. "We're not a shelter in the traditional sense," Arthur said, his gaze sweeping over the fields. "We're a community. People heal here. They find their footing. They remember who they are when they're not just trying to survive." This was the miracle, not just a roof over their heads, but a place designed for healing. The farm provided a chance to work, learn new skills, and connect with others. It was about restoring dignity, one planted seed at a time. The secret wasn't a catch, it was a purpose. Sarah hadn't stumbled upon a random act of kindness. She had stumbled upon a system of grace. 6 months later, a different woman stood, looking out over the fields of Hopewell Farm. Sarah's face had lost its gaunt, haunted look. Her hands were calloused from the garden, but they were steady. She was now in charge of the farm's CSA program, organizing vegetable boxes for the local community, a responsibility she took on with pride. She was no longer invisible. She was essential. Leo was thriving. He'd found a mentor in the teenage boy he met on his first day and was now the farm's resident expert on chicken care. He was doing well in school, his quiet intensity now focused on books and learning, not just survival. And Maya was a different child entirely. A whirlwind of chatter and laughter, her silence a distant memory. Her world was now filled with the magic her mother had once only been able to promise in stories. The transformation was profound.
As
Many experts in the US and other countries will tell you, housing is essential, but it's not always enough. Families also need a network of support to truly heal and thrive, opportunities for work, healthcare, and trauma-informed care. Hopewell Farm understood that. It understood that healing isn't just about having a key to a door, but about having a community that welcomes you on the other side. Sarah's journey had taken her from the crushing anonymity of the city to a place where she was known, valued, and loved.
she
Had found more than a home. She had found a place to grow. Sarah's story is a testament to the power
of a second chance.
But the reality is, family homelessness is a growing crisis. In the United States, for example, data from a recent school year showed that more than 1.5 million students had experienced homelessness. Places like Hopewell Farm, inspired by real-life sanctuaries, are vital, but they are far too rare. But you don't need a farm to make a difference. The story of Sarah and her children began with a single act of seeing someone in need and not looking away. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more content that highlights the power of human connection. And consider looking up what local organizations are doing in your own community. In the US, groups like Family Promise or the National Alliance to End Homelessness are doing critical work, but even your local food bank is on the front lines. The most important thing you can do is to choose to see the people around you, to offer a smile, a kind word, or a helping hand when you can. To remember that every person has a story, and no one deserves to be invisible. For Sarah, Leo, and Maya, their new life began when one person refused to let them fade into the background. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest miracles don't come from a grand gesture, but from the simple, profound act of paying attention. From the quiet decision to be the one who doesn't look away.